If you start to shift your thinking around doing yoga online, about being quarantined, about how the holiday season is going to look this year, away from hard, oh, it's going to be hard. It's going to, like, and hard it just sounds painful. It sounds like there's all this effort. It sounds like you're probably not going to get a positive outcome, right? Whereas I feel like human beings rise to the challenge. I feel like if you shift, and I'm talking like relentlessly, if those listeners out there, you're hearing my words right now, just commit that you're going to be really on top of hearing how often you think hard or you say the word hard to somebody else, and shifting it to the word challenging. Where we are on this planet is like, the top species on the planet because we rise to a challenge. We're problem solvers, we're analytical thinkers, and when you think something's hard, it's going to stay hard for the rest of your life until you shift your perception about how you can face that challenge, how you can rise to it, how you can ultimately overcome it, and then learn and grow and move forward from it.
Welcome. It's Amelia Andaleon, yoga and meditation teacher. It is Monday, December 28th, 2020, and the voice you just heard was from our guest today, Mike Murdoch. Mike joins us from Toronto, Canada, and as I was preparing this episode for you today, I had a hard time picking one quote because there's so many nuggets of wisdom in this episode. And I picked something that he shared near the end: choosing perspective to see things as challenging instead of hard. And I have to tell you, as soon as I heard that in this episode, I taught that night of this recording, and I actually taught that lesson in the class, and it was so powerful, so impactful. It's such a simple message to choose to shift perspective from hard to challenging. And I saw that as a theme in this entire episode, as Mike, he shares very openly and candidly about an eating disorder. He's had dysmorphia, and his challenge being a 240-pound 13-year-old, a teenager at 240 pounds, and then where he is today, offering programs, his Move, Nourish, and Heal programs to promote mindful movement and plant-based nourishment to heal body and soul. He's very open. He's very honest and real in this episode. I love that so much. He shares about his career in the food industry as a chef, and he also talks about his programs, his yoga teaching, his YouTube channel, so many things that he's doing to lift up people in his life, and he's spreading it now to even more people through the internet. And I found it was actually really refreshing how he is one of the few people and even teachers that I've heard him embrace the internet right now. So it's encouraging me, instead of seeing the internet as something getting in my way or something I'm feeling weary about in 2020 with COVID and all of us at the shutdown. It's so encouraging to hear him embracing it and how much he is able to create that connection. And that was a boost that I personally needed, and I hope that you'll hear that too. There's a lot of energy in his voice and in his being, his way of being, and how he expresses himself. And I really, really enjoyed this episode. And I'm so glad to share more about Mike Murdoch with you today. So I want to share his bio, a little bit more about him. So with a passion for all things nourishing and a drive to innovate, Mike's career in the food service industry has spanned 2 decades. Cordon Bleu trained with a grand diploma in cuisine and pastry, Mike has worked in all areas of the industry, from fine dining to corporate. After years in the grocery sector as a chef and recipe developer to several of Canada's largest food retailers, his focus shifted to health and wellness. Having been extremely overweight as a child, shifting diet and lifestyle had a profound impact on his own health and well-being. After being introduced to yoga in 2014, the practice allowed him to cultivate inner calmness and self-acceptance. Now a certified 500-hour registered yoga teacher, Tier 1 certified Baptiste yoga instructor, and culinary nutrition expert, he aims to help others find their own path towards optimal health and environmental sustainability. So much for you to appreciate and listen to. Sit back, enjoy. Thanks for being here. I want to take 30 seconds to say thank you to my sponsor, Anchor.fm. So, Anchor is the free app that you can download, which I use to create this episode. And you can also go to the website, Anchor.fm. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so you can hear it on Spotify, on Apple, on Google, and so much more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It has everything that you need to make a podcast in one place. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to Anchor.fm. Welcome, Mike Murdoch. I'm so grateful that you're here today. I'm excited for my listeners to get to know you. Thanks for joining my podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This podcast, Spiritually Fit Yoga, I focus on spirituality and fitness and yoga and how those intersect together. And when I have guests like you, the first thing I want to ask is, what does spirituality mean to you?
Yeah, I got this question from you a couple days ago and I've been thinking about it. And it was really, for a long time, I was resistant to the thought of spirituality because I really lumped it in with religion, which I didn't always have a positive experience with in my life. But as I kind of went through the practices of meditation and started to get into yoga, I really just kind of see spirituality now as any practice that really has a positive impact on your life, on the world, or on the people around you. So just practices that make you a better person, make me a better person, I guess I could say.
Would you share more about your path to yoga or fitness or?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I'm sure you mentioned in the bio that I was 240 pounds at 13. So I grew up kind of playing video games with no physical activity as part of my life. No one in my life and my family was super physically active. I had a lot of obese people in my family, and I grew up playing video games. And I was, again, really overweight. It wasn't until I found yoga, I can honestly say, that any kind of physical practice stuck for me. And I found yoga when I was 31 years old. I'm 30, almost 38 now. And it was the way that it happened really was that I worked at this company, and one of the girls I worked with that was in product development, and I was a corporate recipe developer at a big grocery store company. And this girl, a couple of years later, after this is after I had found meditation, she opened a yoga studio. And when she did her teacher's training, and part of the certification was to teach some classes to friends and family. Just you had to teach, I think it was 6, just to get the certification. And I was one of her 6. She was coming over for dinner and she said, "Hey, like, would you mind me teaching you and your partner some yoga?" My partner's name was Mike, so I just say it's easier than saying Mike to be confusing. Also, the same name as me. So, and we're not together anymore, but he's healthy. He did survive the testicular cancer. I always feel like I should mention that part. But yeah, so she offered to do this class for me, and I kind of, this is, again, friends had offered for years, and I just kind of laughingly agreed as a favor to her so she could get her certification. It's like, oh yeah, yoga, and then we'll have wine and dinner, whatever, And I did a 45-minute practice that night, Journey into Power, Baptiste Yoga, and it changed my life. Like, I remember my partner too. I looked over to him at the end of that class and said I could really see myself teaching this. And my body didn't fit into the practice at that time very well. Everything was achy, and I felt like I had no mobility, and all those stories I'm sure you've heard from people before. And it was just over time, I started doing podcasts every day. So my teacher, Kinley McCollum, she brought Power Yoga to Ontario. She used to work with Baron Baptiste. And it was through Power Yoga Canada that I started doing her podcasts and practicing 6 days a week, mostly for almost 6 months before my friend actually opened her studio, which was then about 6 months after I found yoga was my first time in a yoga studio. I was wearing a man Spanx, like a compression garment. I was so self-conscious about my body. I still suffer from body dysmorphia on and off. And it was really an experience, like getting into the room and the sweat and the heat. I ran from it. I didn't go back to a studio for 3 months after that first class, kept practicing at home. And finally, I just had this moment of realizing how impactful the practice had been on my life, and also realizing that there was so much I was missing by keeping it just to myself in my room at my house and not being part of the community and part of the classes and the studio environment. And really, it's just been an evolution. I was in teacher's training 8 months after that first class that I did with my friend at home. So,
Wow. Wow, yeah, I appreciate you sharing the details of that. And I think I'm missing a few things. So when you did that 45-minute
yeah.
class, that was a That was in person with a
Yeah, she
friend.
came to my house. This
Yeah,
is
that was in
long
training.
ago before COVID. Yeah, so she came to my house for dinner. We did dinner like once a month regularly type of thing, once every couple months. And she came just and taught me. It was supposed to be 60 minutes. It ended up being 45 minutes. Don't tell our certifier, right? But it was just really that. It was like I remember coming out of Shavasana at the end of that class, and it was like there couldn't have been more of a 180 flip in my brain about what yoga was, what yoga meant. Like I had never done yoga other than I had done like, the Power 90 videos in the early 2000s where there was like a power yoga warm up for 3 minutes at the beginning. And again, nothing ever stuck. So I maybe did that a dozen times in my life type of thing. Right. And it was just this experience of like, whoa, apparently like, I remember thinking like I didn't know that's not what I thought yoga was. Like I don't know what yoga is, if that's what yoga is, right? And it was just that I have a yoga body, if you know what I mean. Like I'm actually like by everyone, like I'm abnormally flexible for a man. Like my back bends and just the kind of stuff that I can do with my body is not normal. And it was an evolution, but I remember that first class just kind of like if I felt like a fish out of water, but it also fit, if that makes sense. Like my body liked what it felt, even though it was, uncomfortable and huge challenge for I mean, it's still a challenge. We all know like yoga, if you're really into the actual practice and taking it every day as it comes, then it's a challenge every time you show up. And it was just that impact was just like, wow, like I need more of this. Like I've never done something had never done something physical before that day that made me want to do it again. I would do some things again and again because I know I'm making air quotes. It's good for me and I should, and it's going to be good for my health and all those things. And forcing myself to do physical activity never stuck for more than a couple of weeks before I would go right back into bad behaviors and vices. And with me, it's food, it's binge eating disorder. And yoga was kind of it was an access point to getting clear on how what I was doing, what I was putting into my mouth, how it was affecting my body. Like I couldn't eat a big plate of fish and chips and go do yoga and pretend like it wasn't a very different experience than if I had a green smoothie 2 hours before I did yoga, right? And that was really what kind of led me into doing the training in culinary nutrition and ultimately, the work around mindfulness and mindful eating and all of that I'm doing now. So
Yeah, that is so true, right? I mean, the yoga, whether you do it in the morning or anytime during the day, what you eat. Like I know you and I, we've done our yoga teacher training. We plan ahead of time before our
mhm.
classes, like whether it's 2 hours ahead or because we're gonna feel it when we're practicing getting upside
Yeah.
down,
Yeah.
the vigorous practice. And then again to the first two classes you mentioned 45 minutes. The first one, was that in a heated room or not? It was at
No,
a
so the
home
first
or
one that was 45, like the one that I did at home with my friend, that was just, I used to have like a room it was a master bedroom, but I'm just a man and I didn't need a huge bedroom. So I made it a gym and took the small bedroom as my bedroom. So that gym was where I did the first class. And then it was, I want to say, I think it was 2 months. I said 3 earlier. I think it was 2 months after that first class is when the studio opened, her studio, the same person. It was her and her business partner, who was another friend actually from the corporate grocery job. So the two of them that were friends from corporate opened this yoga studio, and that was the one where I showed up. That was a 60-minute journey into power, heated class. They are still known for having the hottest room in all of the Power Yoga Canada locations. So it was very sweaty, a lot of suffering, and again. Having body dysmorphia, I was in the front row and I just left that class like empowered physically. Like the practice was great. I felt like it was really juicy and I flowed and I was in it, but I also felt the whole time. I remember thinking everyone's looking at me, everyone can see my muffin top, everyone can see like all the skin that's hanging out, like all of that kind of stuff was so live for me that it really made me run. Like I kept practicing at home, but it was a good I think 2 or 3 months. I think I mixed up the numbers. It was 2 months from my first class to the studio, and then it was about almost 3 months before I had the courage to go back into a yoga studio and show up in yoga clothes and practice in front of a group again. And that's been a process of evolution. Like I did level 1 and level 2 with the Baptiste Institute, and it wasn't until I finished level 2 with Paige Ellenson that I even felt comfortable taking my shirt off in a class. Not that I was teaching, that I was even practicing. I would let myself suffer and feel like I was going to faint before I would take my shirt off. And that was it's just been a process still to this day, finding that where I catch myself, looking at my body and thinking those really horrible critical things, which we all, I think a lot of people do that. But I've suffered from that for a lot of my life, having gone up and down with my weight so much. And yoga has just been such a way to empower me in my own physical body and started to shift so much of those negative thoughts onto acknowledging how strong I've gotten and how much more flexible I am. And just, I'm healthier now at 30, almost 38 than I was at 24 and 25. 100%. I believe that. So,
Thanks for sharing that. And I know, from the bio that I shared earlier, that, and as you shared, you're a chef and you're a yoga teacher, yoga instructor. And how is that, either one or both of those together? How is that part of, I talk about spiritual fitness, as a practice. How do you see those, lumped into spiritual fitness in your life?
I definitely see that yoga is a spiritual fitness for sure. Meditation is another one. Generally speaking, like the world of chefs is a pretty high paced, pretty stressful kind of environment. And I'll just be clear, I haven't worked like in a restaurant on a line for over a decade, but I've done all kinds of areas of food service, and it's pretty like, fast deadlines if you're working like I did corporate work, and it's a lot of really high stress situations. And I find that my meditation, which was really my first access point, even well before yoga, several years before yoga, just as a way to kind of calm me down and allow me to deal with those kind of stressful situations. I found meditation when I owned a bakery and I was, working at 3 a.m. My partner at the time came down with testicular cancer while I was doing, 14 to 16 hour days, 7 days a week. And it was finding guided meditations on YouTube that I would sit in my car and do like an 8 to 10 minute meditation at like 2:45 in the morning before I had to go in and start baking. And that was really my first access point to mindfulness in any way. I was very resistant to yoga for years. I worked in a company where there was a gym and friends were yoga teachers, and I could have had yoga for free, anytime I wanted. And I was a no to it for almost like 5 or 6 years before I finally started meditating and then allowed myself to get into the spiritual practice of yoga.
Yeah. So, yeah, that is so awesome. And it's funny. I mean, you talk about the Spanx, and some of it is our self-perception,
Hmm.
right? How we see ourselves, which you talk about your thank you for sharing so openly about your dysmorphia,
Hmm.
and which a lot of people experience, and I'm sure listening to this.
Yeah. And a lot of
And
people don't realize, sorry to interrupt it, but people don't realize that
yeah.
it is like it's a thing. Like you don't have to be diagnosed with body dysmorphia to it's different
Hmm.
than that walking by the mirror and be like, "Oh, I look fat today." It's way deeper than that. Like everybody has, I think, those moments of judgment of their body, which aren't healthy either, but it's I can honestly say that there have been big chunks of my life where the word hate is the only way I would describe how I felt about my body. Like I hated, I loathed it. You know what I mean? And that's something that I almost never anymore get to that level of negative thinking about my body, which was something that was commonplace for me for many, many years.
And you know what I'm also present to is, as a woman, I feel like I've heard more about, body image issues, for, as a young girl, growing up, and then in college, I remember a lot, and then even beyond. And I don't personally hear a lot about it in men, and I know it
It's in the
exists.
you know what? And I've heard some statistics, and I'm not gonna try to fudge them, but I've actually heard statistics that in the gay community, 'cause again, I'm a gay man, that in the gay community, it's actually can be even worse than in the for girls, So, like, young gay men in their teens, which is when this really kind of happened, it's very, very rampant in the gay community for just for people not to love their bodies and think it's not good enough, and that's something you need more, and you have to work at, like, the just workout addiction and food eating disorders in the gay community is huge, right? So that is one of the reasons I kind of talk about this, because I don't think a lot of people, when they would meet me, if you saw me, see a picture of me, the first reaction is like, oh, this is like, an attractive, healthy yoga guy that's always been healthy and active his whole life. And it's so far from the truth with me. And I mean, with a lot of people, that first impression we make about them, like you see someone that's really looks really ripped and is like a gym rat, and they might have all kinds of eating disorders and stuff going on. I'm not to put that on other people, but it's really something very insidious for a lot of people that they might not even realize that it's an eating disorder, or a mental hang up about their physical body that is what's driving them in so many areas of their life, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, of course. Now, people that don't know you,
Mhm.
if they take a peek, go to your YouTube channel and go to Instagram, and it's just like, yeah, exactly. They would look at you and think, yeah, this guy is fit, lean, attractive, all of those things
Thank
you
you.
said. And
It's hard for me to even hear those and take those compliments because I have the ugly duckling syndrome. I had cystic
yeah,
acne and
yeah.
glasses and wore ties to my picture day up until like 8th grade. So like it's still like to hear, just to say thank you when someone says I'm attractive. That's uncomfortable for me because it's so out of what I was used to for most of my life, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, a lot of us have a lot of us have that. That could be a whole nother
I think
episode.
we
We
could
could
do
just
that one.
focus
Let's book that for 2021.
we could focus on yeah, yeah, and what inspires me so much, there's actually a lot about, what you're sharing in your story that inspires me. But I think that there's so many that could hear inspiration from you is like how you went from 13 years old, 200, did you say 245 pounds?
238 was the highest I ever got. I rounded up to 240 just because, but yeah, I remember getting on the scale one day and I even remember the pants I was wearing. I had a pair of hand-me-down pants that were a 44-inch waist, gray corduroy pants. Trust me, when I was in 6th grade or whatever it is when you're 13 in the early 90s, gray corduroy bell-bottom pants were not a fashionable choice. But I remember that they were 44 inches. They were a bit big for me. I was probably like a 42. I needed a belt to wear them. But I remember wearing those pants and stepping on the scale and seeing at 238 pounds when I was around 13.
Hmm. And how were you treated by other kids?
I was verbally abused relentlessly by other people. Physical abuse was never a thing. I was never beaten up. I've never been in a physical altercation with anybody in my one time in high school, and it was because of how I dressed. I got a election sign broken over my head by some thugs, but growing up it was more verbal abuse really, and I never had no one tried to be I was 6 feet since 6th grade. Basically I started smoking when I was 13 as well, cigarettes, and I haven't grown an inch basically since I was that age. So you can picture me at 13 at 240 pounds and 6 foot, a little bit more than 6 foot. In my grade 6 graduation picture, I'm as tall or taller than all the teachers and bigger than every single one of them except for one teacher on the staff at my elementary school, right? So, but relentlessly bullied. First I was bullied for being the fat kid, and then I was bullied for being the gay kid, and then I was bullied for being with acne on some level too, because I had kind of the worst acne you could, like cystic acne, like carbuncles. My face, I always say, looked like hamburger meat when it was at the worst place. So that was it was adult onset. My acne started when I was later in my teens, like 17, 18 type of thing. And it was just basically one thing after another, things people could bully me for, essentially. And it definitely had a huge toll on me. It's been, again, through a lot of this work through yoga, getting clear how much of my day-to-day decisions were being guided by that like little bullied 7 or 8 year old that was worried about people rejecting him and making fun of him. So
Yeah. And then now how if you don't mind me asking you, how heavy were you when you did that first 45-minute
So I
class?
was probably around 200 pounds. Like, so my weight, and again, I've heard some science behind whenever you're really overweight as a child, that like my fat cells, it seems, can expand and contract very readily. Like I can put on 10 pounds in 5 days and I can lose 10 pounds in 5 days if I put my mind to it, right? So like roller coaster dieting, that was my life until, and even up till recently. Like I won't lie, there was a chunk in COVID where I was getting vegan donuts every day and eating them, right? Even though they're full of gluten and sugar and all that stuff. And it's just, for me, the eating disorder can come back and take hold of me, and I have to be really aware of that. But I lost actually track of what your question was. Remind me, sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm just tracking your journey and like what it physically felt like for
Yeah.
you, like when you did that 45-minute class and the spank class. So you were about 200 pounds, you
Over two.
say?
So when I did that job, I was probably between 200 and 215. At that part of my life, I was around there. Now I'm about 175, 180. So you think that's about 20 to 30 pounds heavier than I am now. I never got back all the way up to, I was, crazy enough, I've never been heavier than I was when I was 13. The highest I ever got was back up to almost 230. And I remember that was like a slap in the face the day that I got on the scale and saw that I was back. Because I'm not a daily weigher. Like I'm not somebody, even at my worst, most obsessive, I'm not weighing myself daily, but it would go, sometimes weeks would pass and I'd get on and see 15 pounds, 20 pounds heavier. And I remember that day that I got up to almost 230, which was when I worked in the corporate grocery. I used to taste products for 3 hours a day. It was part of my job, 5 days a week. And you learn how to use a spit cup. And a lot of the time you don't. When you're tasting 20 cheesecakes or 16 ice cream flavors, like these things, it takes a toll on your waistline, let's say. And I was really in a very miserable place when I left the corporate grocery industry because I had just gotten so unhealthy in that lifestyle of eating processed products and developing recipes using processed products, right? So
I wonder, can you pinpoint? So, so for those listeners that are not familiar with Baptiste yoga, typically it's practiced in a hot room, maybe 90, 95, 100, somewhere around there, depending on the studio, with some humidity. So it's a hot, sweaty practice, and it's a physically, it's a rigorous practice. And that first 45 minutes that you practiced at the home, which was not in a studio, you didn't get it sounds like you didn't even get the full 60 minutes, or typically full JIP,
right.
Journey into Power, 90
Yeah.
minutes. And yet there was still something. Can you pinpoint what was it that you said that it made you want to go into a studio, even if you're going to wear man
Yeah,
spanks?
I wore man spanks
Man
all the way through,
spanks.
halfway through teacher's training, till the one day I forgot to wash it and I went without it, and 3 people separately came up and told me I looked so much better without that stupid compression garment on. And that was a whole nother wake up call there. I never wore it again after that day because I was like, I thought no one knew, right? You think that you're like, it's that ignorance, like, oh, absolutely nobody knows that I'm wearing this. They don't notice that I'm dying of heat stroke because I'm literally wearing like a spandex
Yeah,
garment underneath all my clothes.
yeah.
What I can say about that first class, I think for me, there's something, it's breath. Like breath is what comes to mind when you ask that question. I'm like Ujjayi which is the style of breathing that we do in Baptiste yoga and in a lot of different styles of yoga. It's an audible breath, right? And that style of the connecting the breath to the movement. I think before yoga, I think of working out as just like huffing and puffing, not being able to breathe, hating my life, being miserable in every single thing that, whether it was a workout video or trying to go to the gym for short bursts or trying to start jogging or whatever it might be that I tried that was unsuccessful in the past. The connection and just the way that Baptiste yoga is taught, which again, going like, it doesn't really matter how long the class is. I don't think if the person is instructing you in such a way to get you into your breath and your physical body, 15 minutes can change your life, right? And that's kind of what, with my YouTube channel, that's what I've been doing a lot of, is really making any length of class there's a 6-minute flow on there. And it's like, if you have an excuse, you don't have any excuse not to find 6 minutes in your day, right? So it's kind of looking at, I think that 60 minutes is great and 90 minutes is amazing. And 10 minutes of moving your body every day is going to have a huge impact if it's not something that you already practice.
All right, so teenager, then you graduate, and then at that point, what made you decide to become a chef?
Yeah, so my journey through high school, I was like what's called like I was in the enhanced learning program in high school, so like it was me and 14 other brainy kids that all did all of our core classes together, and I was very driven. My parents never were like, it's not like they forced me to do any kind of classes at school, but there was definitely kind of a pressure to do the sciences and those kind of things. The no bird classes, if you will. I did photography and music, and that was basically the only 2 classes in high school I did that weren't academic classes. And no offense to any photographers or musicians out there, but it was really I was actually doing a history class, and my goal was to become a microbiologist and immunologist. So I was doing all of the necessary sciences in high school to get into university for that. I applied to University of Toronto for microbiology and immunology, which is like making vaccines and just working at like a microscopic level about the human body and biology. And I was accepted to U of T, but I actually had this one teacher that kept pushing me, and you love food. You're going to be like, do you really want to do that? Like, I just don't see you looking through a microscope for the rest of your life, and one could argue maybe she shouldn't have been so pushy to someone that was in such like, an important stage of their life. But I think she did it really for me. Like, it was the best thing that could have happened, because I know I was good at science. I always had really good marks in science, but I don't think I would have been groundbreaking anything. It would have been me looking through a microscope, taking notes for somebody else that was that much smarter than me, right? And my career as a chef, it did it. So I was applied to multiple places. I found out later I had been accepted to U of T, but I decided to go to the Cordon Bleu, which is a very prestigious cooking school. At the time, there was only 20 of them around the world. Their curriculum's taught in other schools, but it's different than actually going to the school. And I was basically taught the same way as a French chef would have been taught 200 years ago. It was very just hands-on, classical French cooking, most of it. And I came out of that, went right into the restaurant industry, which is kind of what most people envision their life, I think, when they leave culinary school, is that you want to work in catering or in a restaurant, right? So I started doing that work. I worked as a line chef for. I went to school in Ottawa, like the capital of Canada, which is where the Cordon Bleu is in Canada, and I stayed there. That's where I met my partner as well, though it's the same partner I was talking about. He's a pastry chef, so we met in culinary school. And I did work there at some fine dining restaurants. I worked in the oldest restaurant in Ottawa, and then I came. Um, it's a long story. My dog ended up getting me evicted from howling when I was going to work too early in the morning. So we made the choice to come back to Toronto just to be near family, so we would have support in that way. And it was when I came back to Toronto, I started working in catering. I was doing like some high end catering as a first cook, and then that's kind of where I stumbled upon which is what really my career still is doing recipe development. And I've worked now for 3 of Canada's largest food retailers. So like I'm not going to mention names just now, but there's dozens and dozens of my recipes on really popular products across Canada, and a lot of those products are things that I probably would not eat or recommend to anybody that I'm coaching to eat either. Right? So they're all processed foods. I really felt through a lot of my work, and not as much. I still do some side work with one company, and but the ones that I was working with in the past, there was definitely moments that were very low for me, where I would be asked to develop back to school recipes using sugar filled, highly processed ingredients, and then they'd post these things on social media, and it would just be parents saying how you're monsters, this is poison for our kids. And I'm like, I did that, really cool. Like having been a morbidly obese child, pushing processed foods onto people really didn't fit. But I was really lucky to fall in that first job because it taught me about recipe development. I've developed hundreds, I would say probably, over 500 recipes in my career now. And that's kind of what I'm doing now is I've shifted that focus onto developing, plant-based, mindful recipes for people to make.
Yeah, and that's one of the last, I guess it was a webinar, that AJ
Mhm.
had invited me to on Zoom that I took from you, a class, and it was talking about recipes and eating mindfully, and now I feel like it's so great. It's so interesting hearing your story, and how you arrive. This is our evolution,
Yeah.
right? Whether from you, yeah, what you experienced as a kid, and now where you are today, and we're going to continue to evolve. And so today, can you talk about, so you have workshops and you have a business and a YouTube
Yeah.
channel,
So
and you're emphasizing mindful movement and plant-based nourishment to heal body and
yeah,
soul,
so my
right?
platform is Move Nourish Heal, and those 3 words kind of really sum up what my philosophy is. So mindful movement every day, whether it's yoga, even just getting out into nature, walking your dog, going on hikes, um, any physical activity is really what I mean there. Nourish is all about what you're putting into your body. Food is fuel; it's either poison or it's medicine. Really, what you're putting past your lips. So I really talk to people about mindful eating. It's not about any one specific eating plan that I get behind fully, as much as being really honest with how what you're eating is nourishing your body. And then heal comes to, it's kind of just around mindfulness. Like if you do those first 2 things, you move and you nourish and you get mindful, then you're going to heal your body, right? And so what's gotten me to this point, if we did this a year ago, I would probably have had 100% different answers. COVID has definitely been a blessing and a curse for a lot of people, and for me it's opened up a lot of opportunity online, right? So I was at where we met at the Global Teacher Summit in California earlier this year. I think it was in March, I think, right? So I
Yeah.
landed in Toronto the day before the full lockdown of the city. I landed on a Sunday and they locked down at 12:01 a.m. that Monday morning, right? So you can imagine, after having left something like a teacher summit where we were like 100 and whatever, like 150, I think, ish teachers from around the world, inspiring people. We were hugging, we were sweating all over. It was like no COVID protocols because no one even knew it was a thing then, right? And I came back like a yoga teacher fire, like lava, like hot, ready to teach, like ready to jump in and get into the studios. And I was sitting on my couch with my dog, my Roddy, Mr. B, right? And I knew I needed to do something. For years I've been having humming and hawing about doing a YouTube channel. I had many students, you know, I won't say beg, but some ask multiple times about if I would just even do a few classes for YouTube so they could practice whenever they weren't able to come to the studio. And it was really the whole fear of rejection and not like like the imposter syndrome. Who am I to be doing these yoga classes, you know? And I kind of let all of that drop when I got back from the Baptiste Summit. Like, just, I guess maybe some of the work that we did there and being in a community and just, you know, the talk about like being built together, built to last was the theme of that summit. And I just had this moment of like, I need to keep building my yoga community, even if I can't go to the yoga studio right now. And I was actually, even before Power Yoga Canada announced they were going to go online, I made a Facebook post just saying, hey, I'm back. I'm stuck at home. I'm going to start live streaming on YouTube every day for the next month. And I think I did almost 30 days, or maybe it was 6 days a week. I did live streams starting back like the day after I landed from the Teachers Summit. I've now, I started at that point. I had done a few videos in the past, you know, again, like those ones where I was not committed at all. So I had about 120 subscribers at that point, and I'm now almost up at 1,000. My goal by the end of 2020 is to hit 1,000 subscribers. And that's kind of what it's evolved from there. Is I started, you know, doing that. And then I started doing some Zoom classes, yoga classes. And I realized I was missing a big chunk of people in my life that weren't necessarily yogis. So I started doing some Zoom cooking classes for free as well, where you just like registered and came in. We kind of cooked in our kitchen. I sent recipes and we prepared them together in real time. And I've done now, I want to say 5 of those this year. Or no, the next one that's coming up, there's one coming up in the middle of December that'll be the 5th one, which is around baking. And it was just a way to connect to people, you know, like I really realized how much I missed seeing faces. Before I left for the Teacher Summit, I was teaching 12 plus classes a week, 12 scheduled or 11 scheduled, and then often subs. And I was, you know, you see hundreds of students. I was hugging people. I was making eye contact, asking about their families. Just all of that disappeared, like literally in an instant. And I needed to have I just felt that it was really important to have access to some kind of connection. And that's kind of what it's evolved to. And I've started now from those free Zoom cooking classes I've done quite a few of them. You know, I've done a dozen of them or so in the last couple of months that are, you know, team building exercises for people. Like I'm a Lululemon ambassador, so I've done some for some of the store management teams as well. And it lights me up so much to get to see people's faces and, you know, it just to have any impact, right? I don't necessarily think someone does a 60-minute cooking Zoom with me and they turn around their entire life and all of their eating habits that don't serve them. But little seeds of awareness is the way that we get to big change, right? And everything that I say to somebody that plants that seed, they can't unforget a lot of those things. And I've had people a year after a workshop come and say like, oh, you know, it was like 6 months later, I decided to go plant-based and it's completely changed XYZ about my life, right? So.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and you may not realize, or I may not realize until you hear from someone like me when I take either a class from you, whether it's that webinar I took from you, or hopped onto I think it was a tapas Zoom cooking class with you, and you spark joy. And even if during that moment, you know, during that hour, or I know for me, I appreciate so much. It's like, oh, so nice to do something that's fun.
Yeah.
Something that's like that seems
Yeah.
light, and you know, food can make
Food
people happy.
heals, right? Or it doesn't, but it can. Food can heal
Yeah,
people. And I think that's a
yeah.
big thing for me is it is like I am genuinely that lit up when I see people on a Zoom call, right? Like, you know, people ask me like, how do you keep your energy up? I'm like, there is no, like, I don't have to prep myself. Like, I just click the camera and I see faces smiling back at me and I'm like on fire when I see that, right? And it was it is just that. It's about, you know, making people have a bit of lightness in their life and just kind of trying to flip people's perception of Zoom and FaceTime. That's been kind of one of my side quests. So many people have been in this victim mode of like, oh, I want to be in a studio and we're not allowed to open the studios. True. And there is like so much potential for connection online through these platforms that I think a lot of us didn't have much use for 9-10 months ago, right? I was the one that avoided that FaceTime call. I would like hang up and call back on an audio call because I didn't enjoy it back then. And now it's like all I want is someone to FaceTime me or to give me a Zoom invitation, right? So
Yeah, I'm one of those that had to flip my perspective and shift
yeah, so
my
many,
mindset
so
because
many.
we're in this. We're still in
Yeah.
this. We're still in this world where we cannot be in person the way that we would like. And I had to get over, I'm curious, you said there's a lot of us that have a lot of people that have dysmorphia and may not realize it. And I used to avoid
Mm,
videos or being recording myself or FaceTime because I just couldn't stand the thought of, looking
yeah.
at my own face.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure.
So, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's that. And I have to say that all of these Zoom calls and now recording, creating a library of classes, it's actually been a powerful tool for me to embrace myself looking the way that I look. And I'm heavier than I used to
Yeah.
be. And it just is what it
Yeah.
is. And I'm older than I used to be. And it is what it is. And becoming less
Yeah.
reactive to less charged about and not even allowing myself to say those words
Yeah,
hate
no.
how I
I
look.
don't I don't I don't let myself go. Like honestly, let's be honest. My muffin top has made several cameos on my YouTube channel. Okay? Like when I was still filming classes in the middle of my 2-week donut streak and like it really I would look at them and yeah, there'd be a moment of like, "Oh my god, you look so fat." You can like look at the it's your guts hanging over and it's just like, "You know what? Do yoga. Like just start moving your body, right? Like stop it. Somebody out there is in a place that is like, somebody out there would think I'm skinny. Somebody out there would think I'm the most fit person they've ever seen. Like it's all perspective and catching myself. It's like I always say in my yoga classes, you can't stop the thought from popping up, but you can choose how much energy you give to it. Right? Like if I've programmed my brain for 37 years to be critical of my body, it's not like I can just say, well, I'm never going to think a critical thought about my body again, but I have a lot of power over when that, oh, look how fat you look thought pops up. Whether I answer with, oh yeah, I do look fat. Maybe I should re-record the class or put on a different shirt that's darker so it doesn't look, all of that. Like you can imagine how that spiral can go. Or it's like, oh, I look fat today. And it's like, yeah, and somebody out there might appreciate that I'm still doing the practice. Somebody out there might acknowledge that, that I'm still doing it, even if I am not perfectly fit. They might see their body in my body. All of that kind of a conversation is going to obviously be a lot more empowering in that moment than going down. I always say, like, that road, the self-loathing road. You've wandered down it before. You've had a picnic. You've camped out. You know what that feels like. I know what that feels like. Everybody, I think almost everybody has had at some point in their life where they were, critical of themselves. And when you go down that road, it always leads to the same place. And it's not somewhere that you want to spend any amount of time in, right? So,
Yeah. So there's a lot of information that you've shared and we've talked about and and there might be somebody listening right now that has dysmorphia or is struggling with their body image or eating or an eating disorder. And what would you like to say to those people?
first of all, you're not alone, right? I think a lot of us make it like we're broken. I'll say like I felt like I was broken for a lot of my life. Like I like what's wrong with me? Like people would tell me I looked good, and it literally like that. My reaction was not thank you. It's like they're lying, right? And it's so deeply ingrained, and it's so many people out there are suffering from something like that where they have an unhealthy relationship with food, and honestly, like your relationship with food, I would argue, is the most important relationship in your life. So, starting like if you avoid food, if you don't like to cook, if you, if you anorexic, bulimic, binge eating disorder, which I think is like kind of like bulimia is kind of in between. Binge eating is the opposite of anorexia almost, and it's like there's something to be said about if you're ignoring that relationship to food and expecting all the other areas of in your life to fall into place, I just don't think it's possible, right? I really believe that the food, like I said earlier, the food that you're putting into your body is either medicine or it's poison. And if you're only eating toxic things, but sitting there wondering why you're not more positive mentally, why you don't have a more positive mental outlook. There's just so much science now backing up how what you're eating and the state of your gut health can be affecting your mental health and really in a negative way contributing to making those things way worse. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that fits. It's hard for me to try to get into the head of somebody with a different eating disorder than my own, and I don't want to try to do that because I know they're all different. And even two people with binge eating disorder, it could show up completely different from one to the other. But there's something. It's a broken relationship to food. I feel like a lot of the time you love it, but you think it's going to make you fat, or you hate it, so you don't want to go to the trouble of it. Like it's too much, a burden in your day, type of thing, right? And what I really get to is that if your relationship with food is struggling, like all the other areas of your life are probably going to be struggling too, because it's the building block of your body and it's the building block of your mind. And if you're putting in, toxic building materials, then you're going to have a really hard time. I know I have a really hard time shifting my mindset. Like those days of donuts that that was only a couple months ago, right? I went to Iceland. I was there teaching yoga in Iceland. I came back and I lost my hard drive on the plane, and I was back stuck in a 2-week quarantine, and I went into a dark depression after that happened. I really did. And I started eating all those foods that I know are bad for me, which then lead to inflammation. So I'm sore. So I wasn't doing yoga as much. And there's no part of me anymore that argues with the fact that what I'm eating is affecting my thinking and affecting my ability to get out of bed in the morning with a positive outlook on the day and be productive and accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. When I'm eating donuts, it's sitting there watching Netflix, eating another donut an hour later, and just letting that blood sugar roller coaster drag me down until I finally break out of it again.
Yeah, and our gut is considered the second brain.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
I have a whole workshop on that one. I can talk to you about that for 3 hours.
Oh, no. Yeah, so I do want to hear about your upcoming workshop. So, at the time of this recording, we're in early December, but I'm going to be posting this. It'll be around the holidays, probably either before Christmas or just after. So around the holidays, before New Year's, before the this gets published for everyone to hear. And I know for me, I have struggled with sweets.
Oh, we can talk about.
Or
I'm a sugar
just
addict. I forgot to
craving.
mention I'm a sugar addict. Like, and I don't just say it to be cute. I mean, like, I'm like a heroin addict hiding sweets around the house when I let that take hold again. So, yeah. Here, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't want it to, yeah, so in, like, having that relationship with sweets, I've done some of my own work around that, and the holidays can be a temptation, and I know that you have tell me about this workshop that you have
Yeah, so
coming
I
up.
do. So I'm not doing another one of these yet, but two things I'll say. So I do a holiday mindful eating workshop, which is where I talk about kind of different ways to navigate the holiday season. It's really around food psychology, like around different ways to kind of hijack yourself from overeating or from getting triggered from family members that might cause those kind of behaviors around the holidays. And we can talk briefly on some of those points here today. But by the time this airs, I won't have any more workshops happening in 2020. But I am, and this is kind of like inside scoop. I haven't even posted this on social media yet. A friend of mine, she's a certified holistic nutritionist, and she's also a yoga teacher. She's done level 1 with the Baptiste Institute as well. And so her and I have done a couple of times now. We called it the 21-day plant-based power up, which we ran at the studio, and we have been in talks. She's actually who I'm getting on the phone with after I'm done talking to you about doing a virtual one in January in 2020. So if people can find me on social media, find me on my website, there will be somewhere that you'll be able to find some information about that. And it'll be, challenging people to go 21 days, mostly plant-based, and we'll explain kind of all what that means, and with the support of us and just kind of weekly meetings to check in and everything like that. Just as a way to kind of create a new mindset around food in the beginning of the year. December is a very challenging time for people to make dietary shifts. I'm actually right in the middle right now of doing a really extreme diet with my mom. She's overweight and has inflammation, and we're doing like completely grain-free, anti-inflammatory diet this month. But in January, it's more just about like getting people to start questioning their habits, getting people to start looking deeper at their relationship with food and committing to make a change, right? The commitment is really what people if you make a commitment to something and you stick with it, it's not nearly as hard as if you're wishy-washy about what it is that you want to accomplish. So if that made sense, I feel like that did that maybe kind of answer your question.
Yeah, yeah, it did. And I am curious though about what and when did you choose to go plant-based?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I was pescatarian for most of my teenage years, where I would eat the odd protein. This again was in the '90s, so I was vegetarian, where I was eating like vegetarian cheese pizzas and eating really processed dairy products and all that kind of stuff. And I lost weight, and I was more healthy than when I was eating all the really other processed stuff that I was used to eating growing up. But it really wasn't until my yoga practice I started getting more interested in like I'll use the V word. I don't like to say vegan very often because I think that vegan and veganism scares away a lot of people from even experimenting with changing their diet. Like people hear the word vegan and it repels, in my experience, a lot of people are repelled by that word. They've been lectured by an angry vegan at one point in their life. Not to say all vegans are like that, but plant-based is different. It's just really it's a whole foods way of eating, not like the store Whole Foods, but like a whole food plant-based way of eating. Just to me means getting back to things as natural as they can be, like as close to nature as they would be. So instead of with veganism and vegetarianism, to be clear, I don't think that they're bad. They can be very, very healthy, but there's also lots of vegans out there that are eating, McDonald's French fries and a Diet Coke and Oreos and ketchup and calling themselves healthy vegans. And ultimately, to me, veganism, the difference between veganism and plant-based eating is that vegans, it's an ethical choice. And true vegans are not wearing their Uggs boots. They're not wearing a silk blouse. They're not wearing leather. They're not wearing fur. They're not wearing, any of those kind of things. I know plenty of vegans that I've seen trying to tell you not to eat a hamburger in their leather jacket or their leather shoes, right? So plant-based eating is different. It's about coming back to a more natural way. If you're going to eat some animal products, like I do, I'm not a full vegan. I eat animal products maybe a couple days a week, but I go out of my way to get things I feel ethically comfortable with, like animals that have been raised the way that we raised them for thousands of years and not the way that we've raised them for this last 100 years of industrial agriculture, where we've just made it so far removed from the food that our ancestors ate. And it's really about, for me, it's just that I started just getting clear that all those processed foods that I had eaten for 8 years working as a corporate grocery store chef, they weren't serving my health at all, and they were actually what was causing it to be so challenging, what was causing my body to be sore, and what was causing anxiety and depression. Because when those foods are left out and I'm eating a whole food plant-based diet, I really can honestly say that those problems are dialed down to like 2% of what they are when I'm eating the vegan donuts every day. So
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's so great. So good to know. And I definitely am interested in your workshop in January. I can't wait to hear about that. And I'm going to start wrapping up
yeah.
now. And we've talked a lot. I feel like I know we've talked about yoga, how do you practice spiritual fitness? And can you suggest what are your top 3 suggestions to stay spiritually fit?
So my top 3 suggestions, it's probably going to come back to like Move Nourish Heal. I have to say that makes sense for me. So movement, finding time in your day and getting rid of any excuses just to move your body even for 5 minutes. 5 minutes of sun salutations, 5-minute walk around the block, just something to get your body up and moving would be the first thing. I think it's just so important to connect physicality to your mental health, your state of mental health. Nourish, obviously mindful eating and just kind of coming back to really not questioning anymore that what you're putting into your mouth is what's building the cells of your body, and that like it does have an impact. If you're eating McDonald's and packaged food and stuff all the time, you're building your body with really inferior building supplies, and you want to start to look at that because it's going to have an impact on your overall state of well-being. And then heal doesn't really make sense. Mindfulness, I would say, being mindful, adding in meditation, being mindful of how you're responding to the people around you. If you eat the whole bag of potato chips and drink the half a bottle of wine and you're crabby to your whole family the next day, like there's a connection to those two things, right? It's not their problem. It's probably what you've been doing. So I think those 3 make sense for me. Like I would say movement, nourishment, and being mindful are the 3 things that keep me the most connected to my spirituality.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that, and I like that move, nourish, heal. I mean, it's easy to remember, and it's easy to remember you. That's your
Thank you.
business, that's your brand. And I think you've already answered this, but what is the one blessing or gift that has come out of this pandemic for you?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely like the online connection. So YouTube and Zoom. It's being able to connect with people all over the world. When I started that YouTube channel, it was really, as like I said, as a way to connect to my students. So like I knew that there was people that wanted to do yoga with me and couldn't. But then getting random messages on a YouTube video like, oh, hey, I'm from Scotland, never liked power yoga until I found your classes. Thanks so much. And like there's Australia, and I've taught at friend studios in Iceland and Romania, and knowing that there's those yogis over there doing my classes and thanking me for them, it's really been humbling. Just to see how impactful a 15-minute class can be, that somebody, for that one person that comments and thanks you, there's got to be several more that were impacted by it in a positive way. So I think that knowing that I'm helping people in some way, whatever small way it might be, has really kept me going. And on those days where I'm dragging my feet or feeling like my muffin top shouldn't be on camera, it just gets me in front of the camera to record another class.
Yeah, I love that you are really real about that. As a teacher, I really appreciate you. Like you saying that gives me permission to be vulnerable, right? You being vulnerable gives me permission to remind me that the times of muffin tops, like it's
Yeah.
perfect.
Oh yeah. 2020 is the year of the muffin top. I feel like, let's be like, when we look back in history, several things that'll be on the top 10 list for sure. The COVID 20 or whatever they say, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so an add-on question, since you're a teacher, I'm a teacher, and there might be other teachers
Mhm.
listening. Do you have any tips on creating an online business? Like what have you discovered that's worked? Because it seems like what you've got a
I'm almost,
thousand.
I'm at 941 as of this morning, as of when we're recording this. So I will be
Okay.
at 1,000 by the time. Let's say that I'm going to be at 1,000 by the time people are
Yes.
listening to this. But my what I would say is consistency. Keep showing up for people.
Hmm.
Like I have had chunks where I've gone, I've posted every single week at least one video since COVID started. But those weeks where it was just one video, that was like when I was struggling. It was like old footage that I was recycling, or I shot out a 20-minute class so I could just get it over with. And there was a difference in, like, when I'm posting regularly and I'm connecting to people, and I'm on, on social media, engaging people to come and do yoga with me. The more consistent I am, the more I see the numbers go up. And I'm not trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, honestly, for any other reason than just knowing that it's going to help the channel get seen by more people, which means more people are going to be moving their bodies. Like monetizing a video that has, like, 150 views. Like I might be making like $1.50 a month off of the monetization of my YouTube channel. It's not for that. It's really knowing that the more people that see the videos, the more people that like them, the more videos there are, then that algorithm on YouTube is going to be pushing those videos out to more people that might do their first yoga class ever and change their lives, just like I did that day. So
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's a great tip. Consistency. That's always a great tip. So yeah, I can see that Mike and I, we could talk for hours.
of course, yeah.
I can already think about other questions that I would love to ask you. And I know you and I, we do have to like move on. And is there anything else you'd like to share, with our
Yeah.
listeners before we wrap
One
up?
more thing that I would really like to touch on, I'm glad you gave me the opportunity. So what I've been working on a lot through all of this experience of 2020 is shifting my experience from hard to challenging. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So I caught myself a lot early on in this telling myself how hard everything was going to be. It's going to be hard to be quarantined. It's going to be hard to connect with students over Zoom. It's going to be hard to have to wait in line at the grocery store, on and on and on. Hard, hard, hard. Everything's hard. And I just had this shift, and I've started shifting my languaging to challenging every time the word hard comes up. Because I had somebody, I was talking about this with one of the Lululemon store managers, and she knocked on her desk on the Zoom call. She said, I had a mentor one time do that. She said, this is hard. Like, wood is hard. Steel is hard. You know what I mean? And if you start to shift your thinking around doing yoga online, about being quarantined, about how the holiday season is going to look this year, away from hard, oh, it's going to be hard, it's going to, and hard, it just sounds painful. It sounds like there's all this effort. It sounds like you're probably not going to get a positive outcome, right? Whereas I feel like human beings rise to the challenge. I feel like if you shift, and I'm talking like relentlessly, if those listeners out there, you're hearing my words right now, just commit that you're going to be really on top of hearing how often you think hard or you say the word hard to somebody else, and shifting it to the word challenging. What we're where we are on this planet is like, the top species on the planet because we rise to a challenge. We're problem solvers, we're analytical thinkers, and when you think something's hard, it's going to stay hard for the rest of your life until you shift your perception about how you can face that challenge, how you can rise to it, how you can ultimately overcome it, and then learn and grow and move forward from it.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah, no, it's please. The hard versus challenging revolution. I'm trying to change the world with, like, going back to, you asked me, like, I think before we started recording, about like New Year's resolutions. That right there, it's going to be hard to give up sugar, but I want to. No, like, it's a challenge, all right, and it'll also change your life, right? So just rise to the challenge. Give it 30 days. Give it, commit to a certain amount of time. New Year's resolution, like, I'm never going to eat sugar for 2021. BS. I don't believe you. I'm never going to eat sugar for the month of January. I believe that you can commit to that and probably make it work and see what happens, right? And it's kind of going back to, is it hard or is it just a challenge that you want to embrace?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. All right. So, Mike, let us know, how can people reach you, contact you?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at move_nourish_heal. If you just Google Mike Murdoch, I do come up pretty high up there. There's like a debunked telepastor that still has more SEO than I do, but it's moving up. If you Google Move Nourish Heal, my YouTube channel will pop up, so you can find that. Every one of my YouTube videos has links to my social media. I also have a Patreon account, so if anyone wants to go on there, that's crowdfunding to help support the channel and the content I'm creating. I'm not very hard to find, Amelia. If they Google my name, and especially if they put Move Nourish Heal in there with my name, then I'll be pretty easy to find.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'll put the information in the episode notes
Awesome.
too,
Yeah.
with links so people will have that. And then your workshop in January,
So
where
that
would people sign up for
I
that?
have a link tree, which actually maybe that's probably the best thing to put into the information, because that's kind of an updatable link where I can add new stuff. So I'm this is very early. Like, I will know more by the time you actually air this. I'm literally getting on a call with my friend that's the nutritionist at 3 p.m. and we're at 2 p.m. right now. So I will know more soon, but I would just say keep an eye on that link tree. Keep checking in. We're intending to start advertising about this on social media nearing the end of December, and then starting it not right at, like, I like to give people a few days, but within the first week of January, we're going to be starting kicking.
Well, Mike, I enjoyed this so much. And yeah, you mentioned the Global Summit. That's the last time we saw each other. And I think, was that the first time we met
I
each other,
feel
Mike?
like it might have been.
In
You looked
person?
familiar to me, so maybe, I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
you were at one of the programs I was in on team or something. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely was the first time that I definitely was more like, I got to hug
yeah.
you and got to know you and got a sense of
Oh,
you.
remember hugging people,
And I
Amelia?
loved your
Remember hugging
energy.
people?
Yeah.
Ah, those were the
And
days.
we all came back after that. So I was there with, Pilar
Oh,
Queso.
nice.
She was my
Yeah, yeah.
roommate, and we road tripped from the Bay Area, down to Ojai, and we unplugged. We told our families, it's just like, we're gonna do the summit, we're gonna be all in, and then we came back, it was like the world changed.
Actually, yeah. I always joke, I was sitting next to the only man wet coughing into a handkerchief on the way back from California, like the only guy on the plane, and it was like no one was in masks. And I just think now, like, how foreign that world is to us 9 months later, right?
I know, and we were like, we probably would have been considered a super
Oh
spreader
yeah,
then.
100%
I
we
mean,
were
if
a
we
super
knew.
spreader event. Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it was spread. I don't think it had spread widely enough at that point. It
Yeah,
only was really in a few cities, like hot spots. But yeah, definitely, definitely what we did there. Like, I
yeah,
feel so blessed that because again, I landed the day before we locked down. So if it was like a week later, I probably wouldn't have been able to come to that event. So
right, right. Yeah. And yeah, and our Baptist gatherings are so, like, so much energy and love. And
it's such a good
anyway, so
story.
I love that you asked us to shift from hard to challenging, and the invitation to shift from, seeing technology, not as a not as a monster, but actually a blessing. You know, it's what we've got right now. And that's why I'm able to talk to you
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
not less than, it's just different, right? I think that's the thing. Don't make the social media, don't make the online platforms less than the in-person connection right now, because it's all we've got and we might as well make the most of it.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I feel like I got to make the most of it talking
This was
to you
lovely chatting with
today,
you. Lovely.
and it put a smile on my face and in my heart. And I'm so excited to have all the listeners get to know you. And I'm sure this is not the first time we're going to chat. I have a feeling.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, no, I appreciate it,
anyways,
Amelia. I really do. And yeah, have an awesome rest of your December. And like I say at the end of every one of my my yoga videos, is just keep moving your body and keep nourishing your body. Stay connected to your yoga practice and your state of health.
perfect. All right. Thank you, Mike.
Pleasure.
Until next
Yes.
time. Hmm.
Bye
Bye
now.
bye. Move, nourish, and heal. What a great way to practice spiritual fitness, and a great way to remember our guest today, Mike Murdoch. So to follow Mike, go to Instagram. He's at move_nourish_heal. I personally have him as a sponsor in one of my Instagram challenges. It's See the Good 2020, which is going on right now, and he's a sponsor, so you can easily find him there. You can link to him from there. And also on his page, he'll take you to his Linktree website, which has links to his plant-based powered up program, which in this episode, he didn't have a date yet, but now we have a date. It's January 3rd to January 24th. So tune into that, follow him, take his YouTube classes. There's so many things that he offers. I really, really enjoyed this episode, and I'm so grateful I got to wrap up with this particular guest interview for 2020. So I'm not ready to say Happy New Year and end yet, because I'm going to bring you one more bonus episode on December 31st. I really, really appreciate you all listening, tuning in. I noticed that there were a few more reviews posted. I'm so grateful for that. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your ratings. Connect with me, whether it's here on this podcast, or follow me, DM me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, Spiritually Fit Yoga, Spiritually Fit Yoga, spirituallyfityoga.com. And if you're around on December 31st in the morning, I'm also in doing an Insight Timer live stream for them, 9:30 a.m. I'm offering a yoga workshop to release 2020 and welcome 2021. We'll do some journaling, we'll do some meditation, we'll do some yoga. It'll be a great way to wrap up the year and move on to 2021. Thank you all for being here. I'm honored. I'll see you next time. Peace out.